one into the night, deep into right, way out of here.
Swung on, hit it, crushed, and the Phillies are going to lead it.
Harper, the swing of his life.
The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, struck him out.
From WHYY, it is Hittin season. Hey there, podcast pals. I'm John Stolnis from The Good Fight. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Coming up, the hot stove might be starting to heat up a little bit this week, especially as teams have to make some decisions with their 40-man roster and Rule 5 draft picks, and they've got to decide whether or not they're going to non-tender players. So we could see some things happening this week, and we're starting to get some rumblings that some of that stuff may be happening. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about potential solutions for the outfield, kind of a running discussion here on this podcast as we go along, but we're going to focus in on a couple of guys in particular. I also want to have a little bit of a conversation about Andrew Painter. Last week we did Justin Crawford. I kind of want to get into Andrew Painter a little bit here on this episode of the podcast. I got a couple of mailbag questions to answer, and then we also talked with Matt Winkelman from Phillies Minor Thoughts on the Arizona Fall League and to get his expertise on the Phillies farm system. So lots to get to here on this episode of the podcast. Joining me on the round table, again, it's just a two-person round table here on this edition of the podcast. Liz not with us tonight, but Justin Klugh from Baseball Prospectus is here. Follow him on Blue Sky at Justin Klugh. And of course, our Hittin season Patreon podcast, The Dirty Inning and Absolutely Hammered, and author of the forthcoming book, Summer of the Cheap Wieners. That is a lot you got going on there, boss.
Yeah, it's pretty tiring. I'm very tired, to be totally honest with you.
I'm exhausted, John.
Barely had enough time to do another round of Taylor Ward research as the Phillies enter yet another period of hey, this is when they want to go for that right-handed outfield bat, and then we just all hear Taylor Ward's name for a couple of weeks. So dipped back into that pool for this episode.
In a row. Yeah.
Feels like a holiday. It's just every Phillies offseason or trade deadline is Taylor Ward research time.
Taylor Ward Day. It's Taylor Ward Day. Let's just make it November 17th is always Taylor Ward Day. And we'll throw, you know what, we're going to have to, it's kind of like President's Day now where we celebrate, Washington and Lincoln's birthday. We're going to have to throw Jo Adell into the mix when we talk about these two guys. So really, this is our Phillies Hot Stove President's Day
Perspective
edition.
Fits from the Angels Day, collectively, and then parentheses recognized.
Right. Observed, right?
Yeah.
This is what, and this is, of course, is what everybody's been hungry for, the Angels adjacent Phillies podcast. So
these teams are lining up. They are foaming at the mouth to pick apart this Angels roster, man. It's just guy after guy after guy out there.
Yeah. So many great players from an awful team that everybody wants to get their hands on. So we'll dip into that here in just a few minutes. But let's start off talking about the hot stove. And, there are a couple of things coming up this week, Justin, that I mentioned on Tuesday. You have, I think it's Tuesday's the deadline for teams to make decisions on their 40-man rosters. The Phillies have a couple of guys who we know they're going to add. They're going to add Andrew Painter. They're definitely going to add, position player just flew right out of my head. I know they're going to Griffin Burkhalter's probably another one, but now I'm totally blanking on the third person that I knew they were going to add. I'm going to have to look it up as we're talking here. But they're going to teams are going to be making decisions, and unlike the Phillies, there are organizations out there that have too many prospects to protect on their 40-man roster. And this is typically a time when a team is like, well, let me trade this guy who we really like, but we don't have room for, or else we just have to kind of expose them to the Rule 5 draft. So a lot of times teams will be making those trades right about now. And a team like the Phillies, who have a weak farm system, I'm going to call it a weak farm system. They could be looking to make upgrades this week or adding some players. So we'll see about that. And then on Friday, there's the non-tender deadline. So certain players might get non-tendered this Friday. So you might be interested in seeing some of the names that get cut loose by different teams that become free agents. And some of those guys may get traded this week. So that's kind of the scenario this week. I don't think, Justin, we're looking at anything major. And it doesn't sound like we're going to hear from Kyle Schwarber or JT Realmuto's camps this week. And I as I'm looking at this with Realmuto and especially with Kyle Schwarber, I think we're both agreed. Like a lot of what the Phillies are going to do this offseason hinges on what Kyle Schwarber ends up doing. The question is, how long can the Phillies wait? And they certainly can wait a little bit. But I wonder, can it wait? I mean, can it go past Christmas? Like, I mean, at a certain point, you kind of have to say, okay, Kyle, we need a decision made. When in your gut do you feel like that's going to be, Justin?
Yeah, geez. I mean, it's got to be before the new year, right? Like, you get into the new year, and then, February's right around the corner. I mean, like, because you're right. There's a timing. Like, the Schwarber's this domino that's got to fall for the Phillies to do anything. But then, like, what he wants to do is going to be impacted by what other teams are doing and who comes off the market and who goes where, as opposed to, like, who has their eye on potentially signing Kyle Schwarber, and maybe they go in a different direction. And then he's like, all right, I'm more open to signing with the Phillies. I don't know. Well, from all we've heard, that they're both super open to this happening. So the idea of a holdup is just like, okay, they're disagreeing on numbers or years or something. And ultimately they can't be too far apart, or they wouldn't have been, we would have heard nothing. But yeah, they love it. They love each other. This is nothing like the only projections we've heard about this Phillies offseason is that the Phillies and Kyle Schwarber want to run through a sunflower field with our arms outstretched towards each other and then, like, spin around in a loving embrace.
But I think Schwarber wants to also just take a look and see what the other fields look like.
So go ahead and take a look at those fields. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't really be like, hey, you love us and you want to come back so badly? Okay, great. Then understand, like, the business side of this. And I think Schwarber's a reasonable guy.
Yeah, I agree.
I was looking at the general immediacy with which, like, some of this has taken place in the past, and how quickly guys have signed, and why, and, like, what teams have let get out there. And I just, it gets so, like, I don't feel like the Phillies are negotiating, like with Kyle Schwarber. They are, but it's not like fist pounding the table. People are like, it's not like a tense situation, is my read on it. So it just feels like the kind of thing that could get done as soon as he's ready to stop looking around. So, like,
right.
But also, he's got to understand, Phillies are a team. Like, they're going to have a backup plan. They must have the beginning of a backup plan in their heads, at least right now, in case he doesn't come back. So he understands that. Like, let's work it out, because there's a lot of work to do here.
Well, it sounds like one of the backup plans increasingly could be this Japanese slugger that we've been hearing so much about, Munataka Murakami. Nikon Sports, which is a Japanese news outlet, a very reputable Japanese news outlet, had this little rumor. He said Munataka Murakami, who officially submitted his posting application back on November 8th, has already been approached by several teams. One team that is particularly keen on him is the Phillies. The article went on to say, several teams have already begun approaching him, among them the Phillies, who have won the National League East for 2 straight years and advanced to the postseason for 4 straight years. They are particularly keen to sign him. Designated hitter Kyle Schwarber is certain to reject the qualifying offer, and if he transfers they call it transferring to another team. I love it. This is just, reading the Japanese words. The position will become vacant. And then he went on to say Murakami would be the perfect piece for the plan, including using Harper at first base or as a designated hitter. After the GM meetings, Dombrowski said, I haven't been to Japan this year, but we've sent quite a few staff and scouts, revealing the situation after completing a detailed investigation of Murakami. And by investigation, I think he means they're just kind of checking in on him. The Mariners, Mets, and Blue Jays are said to be the other teams who are interested in Murakami, but Justin, I mean, I haven't been keeping a close eye on Nikan Sports and their rumor mill and exactly what they've been churning out, but it sounds, based on this report, at least in Japan, that the Phillies are very, very seriously looking at Murakami, and I gotta believe it's an either or with Kyle Schwarber. I can't imagine that there's a fit for both of these guys to be on the team. So it sounds like the Phillies are already doing their due diligence. And I guess my question is, if Murakami said, like, next week, I want to be on the Phillies, now you got to have a conversation with Kyle Schwarber then, and maybe you have to accelerate Schwarber's timeline. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm realizing as I was going through this scenario that I am not a negotiator, because you can't say, like, oh, hang on, we're waiting for somebody else. But also, you want to believe, again, that everyone understands that, we're operating in a professional capacity here. And, like, saying that doesn't mean we're not interested in you. It's just like our plan involves prioritizing Schwarber, but you can't really say that without insulting somebody. I guess, like, my instinct is like, all right, let's make sure he knows we're interested. Like, let's respond positively to this unsolicited call that this Japanese player really wants to play for a team in Philadelphia. Sure. You know it's costing you because it's probably viewed as rude, and the other teams are getting to talk to him too simultaneously. Murakami isn't the Phillies' priority, I think we know. Schwarber and Realmuto probably are. So doesn't logic dictate they respond positively to Murakami? Let word get out about it to be leverage in the Schwarber negotiations, like, yeah, look, we got this guy ready to go. But then you're risking ticking him off and watching him sign elsewhere. And then you turn around to Murakami, who you hope also hasn't signed somewhere after learning that he was used as a pawn and you're negotiating with someone else. So again, this is why negotiating is hard, I would imagine. And that would be an insane situation if he was suddenly like, yeah, sure, I'll come play with you. I think that would be coming together more quickly than anybody on the Phillies would probably have predicted. Though I am impressed, like having been somebody that's talked about this guy since the offseason started, and just looked at it as an interesting, good fit, despite the scenario not being a likely one based on historical precedent. That the Phillies are showing, admittedly, this much interest is, again, very curious, because since we're never going to know what's going on behind these closed doors.
Right.
What if this is the priority? Maybe they've already thought, like, all right, well, let's really go hard at Murakami because, for some whatever reason we are doubtful that we're getting Schwarber back. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't Schwarber know there was no chance the Phillies don't have a backup plan? Like, unless they've truly have breathless assurances from each other that eventually they're going to work something out. These kind of things have got to happen. And I don't know. I'm impressed. I'm impressed and excited. The Phillies are apparently going so hard at this guy.
Yeah, me too. And I wonder, if they do re-sign Schwarber and he comes at them and says, I really do want to play for you. They've been so anxious to make a big splash in Japan that maybe they feel like it's too good an opportunity to pass up, that it would open the door for other players in the future. And maybe they would find a way to bring both on board. I mean, somebody you'd have to get traded probably from the Phillies at that point to make room for these different players, probably. I don't know. I don't know how that would work exactly, but the guy, I also like the guy Kazuma Okamoto. We talked about him last week on the podcast, the 29-year-old right-handed slugger from Japan. And there's also a pitcher, Tatsuya Imai, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, right-handed starter who is expected to be posted. So, I don't know. I have the feeling that the Phillies are going to, at some point, really soon, land somebody of significance from Japan. They are really, it sounds like, pushing hard to be included among the East Coast teams that these guys would consider going to. And it's not unheard of. The Mets and the Yankees have landed these guys in the past. So it is possible for an East Coast team to get a Japanese player. And frankly, the Phillies have been more relevant than the Yankees or Mets in the last few years. But that doesn't really matter.
I was going to say, if you're a Japanese player and you're willing to go to New York, then you should be willing to go to Philadelphia too. It really is. You're not really shaking things up a whole lot by. So I think the Phillies, you're right. They might be very anxious to just start being a team that gets considered in those conversations, and getting that first guy to agree to a deal and come there is it's going to be foundational to that kind of success. I don't know, but then does that mean no Schwarber? Which,
yeah, I don't want that.
That's a tough one to swallow too. So.
Yeah, I don't want Murakami over Schwarber. I think that much I do know. The only way that would work is if Schwarber decides to go someplace else because he wants to, and then okay, well, I can pivot to Murakami and be okay and feel good about that. If you're prioritizing and choosing Murakami over Schwarber, that I wouldn't feel good about. And I don't think that's where the Phillies are. Doesn't sound like that's where the Phillies are, but it is interesting, how long the Phillies can wait. Thankfully, well, not thankfully, because it's boring for fans and certainly for us content creators. We'd like to have some things to talk about, but the free agent market does move slowly. The baseball offseason moves at a glacial pace, and we sit and just rumorize for the first month or two of the offseason before things actually start to happen. I did remember the other Phillies position player, the Phillies that they're going to protect is Gabriel Rincones Jr. on the 40-man roster.
I was going to say it.
It was there. I just couldn't access it in the moment in which I wanted to. One of the other things that's been reported over the last couple of days, and this is the Athletics' Matt Gelb reporting that the Phillies are being approached by a number of teams about their plethora of left-handed relievers. We're in a time right now in the offseason where teams are looking at what other teams have a surplus of, and then trying to see if there is a match that they could trade for something that they have a surplus of. And right now the Phillies have a surplus of quality left-handed relievers. Now, they weren't so great that, you were dying to use them in the playoffs last year, but nevertheless, They have Jose Alvarado, who's going to make $9 million in 2026. Matt Strahm set to make $7.5 million, and then Tanner Banks, who is the bargain baby, he's going to make around $1 million in his first year of salary arbitration, which is crazy because I think he's 30, and it's like his first year of salary arbitration. So he's as a young old man there. So I think he's the guy who doesn't move. I think the Phillies would like to keep him, just a lot because of the cost. And I also think what the Phillies want is they need some swing and miss. They need strikeouts in their relievers. I think we're looking at Matt Strahm here, Justin, if I'm reading the tea leaves accurately. Gelb says the Phillies would be looking to receive like a mid-level prospect to backfill a farm system that I don't know if I agree with the way that it's been talked about, that it's been depleted. We've traded a couple of guys here, but I mean, I guess the only reason it's been depleted is because they didn't have much to begin with.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. In my conversation with Matt Winkelman that we're gonna hear in a little bit, he broke it down like the Phillies have currently 5 very good prospects, then a layer of about 10 to 15 like fine to meh guys, and then there's a steep drop off, and that's why like they're number 17, in the high teens of most farm system rankings still, and that's kind of where they've generally lived for a while now.
Right.
But that's because they have made deals, and they haven't had the best farm system, but that doesn't mean they haven't been able to find guys in their farm system that other teams have wanted. And when you trade Mick Abel, Eduardo Tait, Starlin Caba, then you are depleting your farm system. So they kind of have slowly been subtracting from their overall skill pool in their farm system. And those absences weren't really refilled, and it's sort of caught up with their overall depth. So, it's not like they're the Padres where there was just a new number 1 prospect every day and they were just like, go, trade. And then suddenly it was like, all right, we don't have a top farm system anymore. The Phillies have kind of just been like mid with some pretty good, like not outliers, but options. And a lot of those guys have just been traded and converted into major league talent. And now there are less of them. So it is true. They have a depleted farm system. It just wasn't very highly touted to begin with.
Right. And they got great value for those picks. I mean, Jesus Luzardo and Joan Duran, I know no one's going to argue about those trades. You make those trades, you'd absolutely make those trades again. But it is, and that's the thing about this farm system is it is thin on potential impact players, prospects wise. I think, you look at a guy like Rincones Jr., who they're going to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. He's a platoon corner outfielder. Now, he's a strong side platoon, and he could be a very productive platoon bat in the majors. But it feels like that's everybody they have outside of Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford. And Justin Crawford's ceiling, I think, is of some debate for sure. The blooms off of Andrew Painter just a little bit, and we're going to talk about him more in just a second. So I'm fine. I'm fine with trading like Matt Strahm. I think you can trade Matt Strahm. I thought his stuff dipped last year. I don't think he was quite as effective. I lost a lot of confidence in his ability to kind of, he seemed like he was just a little out of control at times last year, that he didn't know where the ball was going a lot of times. And, he was largely effective, and he's been a great reliever for this team over the last few years. So I just feel like that's, they have a couple of guys. If Alvarado bounces back and, Tanner Banks continues his progression, you've got 2 really good lefties in the bullpen. I just don't love the idea of getting like some team's 10 to 15 prospect for Matt Strahm. That wouldn't feel like enough to me. Especially for a team that's winning once, that you want to win now. You do want to stock up on the farm system, but I don't know if I'm using Matt Strahm to do that. I'm fine with using Matt Strahm for something. I just don't know that it's that. Yeah,
I mean, the Phillies don't seem like they have like a lot of areas of surplus, so that this is like a little boon for them, I think, is going to be of value. And I think of these guys we're talking about, Strahm is probably the more likely one to go.
Yeah.
But each of the 3 names mentioned has been considered the most reliable arm in the Phillies bullpen at some point or another for a prolonged stretch of time. So they are all viable options for other teams that want lefty help. The Phillies should be doing exactly what they are doing with this, listening to offers and not being like, you don't have to be super aggressive about moving any of these guys. You just have the option to. So yeah, I'm with you. Hearing that like they got somebody's number 17 prospect for Matt Strahm would be like, yeah, that's a bummer. That doesn't really do it for me. If it was like somebody's number 8 prospect or something, like, yeah, okay, now we're talking. Now we're getting up there a little higher to like the kind of talent that I would like to see come back that also actually feels like you are refilling the pipeline, not just adding another guy.
Especially if it's a good farm system, not like a Phillies farm system number 8 prospect. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. So the good news is there's a lot of teams looking for pitching right now. A lot of teams, there's about half the league is looking for starting pitching and prioritizing starting pitching. So there's going to be, a lot of teams that don't get what they're looking for, but there are also a lot of teams that are looking for bullpen help, and everybody who's looking for bullpen help is typically looking at least for one lefty. You got the Twins, Angels, and Reds are all looking for lefty arms. Not the greatest batch of teams to be picking from, but they are out there. But the Dodgers and Diamondbacks are also looking for bullpen help too. And so are the White Sox. They've kind of been picked pretty clean. I'm not sure you need to go down that road. But hey, look, you're at least going to see what people have got. And like you said, see who's got the better farm system to be picking from, and just see what you can get. But otherwise, you're not in a position where like it's not like Nick Castellanos where it's like, yeah, this guy's kind of got to go. It's you have 3 lefty relievers, all of whom could be valuable to a team in search of lefty help. Just see what they're willing to give up. Get something good.
And you move Alvarado, he give you a little bit more payroll flexibility. You lose $9.5 million, and they survived last year without him. Maybe you get a little more for Alvarado than you would Matt Strahm, and there's a couple of positives to doing that as well. So we'll see. I don't think anything's happening necessarily this week, but it sounds like the Phillies are fielding quite a number of offers. This might be a winter meetings kind of a deal. If they're already taking offers, you get everybody in the same place. That feels like the kind of deal that could go down at the winter meetings for the Phillies in a couple of weeks. First week of December, when the winter meetings kick around right after Thanksgiving. One other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the trade market here, and that's the Phillies need right-handed outfielders. We know this, and 2 of the names have been bandied about. We talked about them just a little bit ago. The 2 Angels outfielders, Jo Adell and Taylor Ward. It's amazing how similar their numbers were last year. I put them side by side.
Hey, in a good way, honestly. Like they are both. I feel like there's this reputation for these guys, like among Phillies people, where they are just these unsexy backup options that are, what the Phillies are doing because they aren't going to do something really crazy. And yeah, that's not completely inaccurate
that's kind of where I am.
It's totally fair. But when you start sitting around all winter saying the Phillies need right-handed power bat in the outfield, I mean, look. These guys do that. They don't do everything. They are not ideal fits. They're not going to be the new best player on the team, which again, I think is what a lot of people approach trade season with. Is like, we gotta bring in the new number 1. And that's not what these guys are.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can go into my whole spiel about both of them if you want, but if you had more to intro here.
Well, I'll just set him up because I'll just, kind of looking at the numbers here. Taylor Ward, and again, this is a guy who's the fan base has been asking for the Phillies to trade for 3 years now. He had a 2.7 WAR last year, hit 36 homers, 103 RBIs, only hit 228. But had a 317 on base and a 475 slugging percentage, so a 792 OPS and a 116 OPS plus. Jo Adell, who is younger, only had a 1.2 wins above replacement, but 37 home runs, so 1 more home run than Taylor Ward, 98 RBIs, so just a couple below. He hit 236, 293, 485 with a 778 OPS and a 111 OPS plus. So both guys, I mean, again, Justin, with remarkably similar numbers, remarkably similar profile. I think Ward's a little bit better of a defender in the corner outfield than Adell is, even though Adell's younger and more athletic. It's kind of interesting. I think Adell's got more upside. Ward, you know what you're getting. What did you come up with when you were looking at these 2 guys?
Yeah, largely that's kind of the parallels are so they stand out pretty clearly. And again, neither of these, the Phillies acquiring either of these guys would make sense. Like, it's not like it would be a completely crazy thing for them to do. It just wouldn't be very thrilling. And there are, a legion of commenters waiting to come down on the acquisition of either one of these players. You know, some people favor one over the other. Some people both think like, no, they're both trash, not interested. But I mean, if the Phillies chose to go this direction, it would be addressing one of their needs. It would be. Taylor Ward's a 32-year-old middle-of-the-order right-handed bat. He's had career highs in home runs and slugging in 2025. He had his highest walk rate in 6 years. If I can steal a couple stats from Jo Adell over at The Good Phight. He had the highest walk rate on the Angels other than Mike Trout. And he led the Angels in doubles. I mean, despite this, he's not a contact. He's not like a big batting, like high average guy. He's not a big on base guy. But is that what we're looking for here? I mean, we're waiting to hear how fast the Phillies are going to re-sign the most high power, low average guy on the planet. So Ward does that, and he did it well in 2025. You can call him generic brand Schwarber, but he ideally wouldn't be replacing Schwarber. He would be in addition
He'd be adding
to Schwarber.
To Schwarber. Yeah.
Yeah. So
to be clear, this is not a Schwarber replacement. This
exactly.
is yeah.
So, and I think that's a big deal. And some people would tell you that guys who are reliant on the home run are already too present in this lineup. And you get into the postseason and the home runs stop coming. You want to be able to rely on other kinds of hits, but other kinds of hits in general, offense, that dries up too, just like the home runs. So I'm not sure if there's really a particular advantage between those two types of guys. And that's good because, again, these aren't really two different types of guys. Because then you have 26-year-old Jo Adell. He swings a lot more than Taylor Ward. He doesn't walk as much as Taylor Ward, but he had a 20 home run season in 2024. This was viewed as his breakout season. The Angels, everyone, was waiting for Jo Adell to break out for years, for a very long time. This was a former top prospect and all of baseball guy, just wasn't working. Same old story with Anaheim, except for one major exception. But now he's, hitting 37 home runs and leading Anaheim in home runs. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's a little more of a breakout year than just the 20 home runs last year. But like Ward, hitting for average really isn't a thing here. So again, these are two good players. Not the best, not great, just good. Maybe even just mediocre. I think, again, people around here have started to get tired of hearing at least Ward's name. And again, I'm not saying the Phillies make a trade for him and I'm out in the street banging pots and pans together. Right. Neither are big assets defensively. But the BP Annual said last year they characterized Ward as the type of player who puts a team over the top, a finishing touch, which I feel like is a particularly interesting way to characterize a player that the Phillies are looking for at this state.
They said that about Ward, you said?
They said that about Ward, yeah.
Okay.
And they said about Adell, they said he would benefit from a change of scenery to an organization with strong hitter development. Phillies could probably claim that they have that.
I think you could say that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think Adell would be a more interesting get because I think he has a higher ceiling, but I think Ward has a higher floor. Like you said, that's going to be the shorthand on these guys. That Ward is... maybe he's not going to be as good of as sky high of a hitter, but he's going to be a more consistent hitter. And I think that's going to turn a lot of people on, honestly. So if you want to trade Alec Bowman, a prospect, you're probably going to be getting Ward for that, I think, because he's got 1 year left on his deal, which is kind of a pain in the butt because then you're like, great, so we're just having this conversation again in a year's time. Fantastic. Yeah. But like, if that's the guy, if that's the deal you want to make, I think you can make that deal. The Phillies need a right-hand power bat, and he does that. But again, there's no ideal fit. I saw Cole Weintraub over at NBC Sports Philly was pitching a Ward Crawford Marsh outfield. But last week, we were sitting around talking about how, I don't know, Crawford should be playing in center field. And a lot of people would agree with that, too. So there's a lot of different variables here, and a lot of them are going to be unideal, and that's going to leave people, I think, pretty unsatisfied.
Yeah, I'm looking at their Baseball Savant pages, and Jo Adell's strength is his metrics with the bat are tremendous in terms of expected weighted on base average, xWOBA. He's like a 90th percentile. He's the 96th percentile with expected slugging. His average exit velocity is in the 86th percentile. His barrel percentage is in the 96th percentile. Hard hit percentage is in the 87th percentile. Bat speed 99th percentile. And then you get down to some of the plate discipline numbers. His chase percentage is in the 20th percentile, whiff rate 25th percentile, strikeout rate 16th percentile, and the walk rate 20th percentile. So there's just not any plate discipline. But when he hits the ball, Jo Adell hits the ball really hard, and he's generally hitting it out of the ballpark, at least in terms of last year. Now fielding, he's in the first percentile in terms of range in the outfield. Outs above average, -12 outs above average for Jo Adell last year. His arm value is in the 19th percentile. Arm strength about middle of the pack. He's 63rd percentile in sprint speed when it comes to running. So again, bat. Guy hits the ball goes far, hits home runs, and maybe there's more there because he's younger and more athletic. That's what you're getting with Jo Adell. With Taylor Ward, it's a little bit more all over the place. His expected batting average is in the 17th percentile, but his expected slug is in the 67th. He doesn't have as much red on his page in terms of all that stuff as Adell does. Hard hit percentage is just in the 47th percentile. Sweet spot percentage, 57th percentile. Bat speed, 15th percentile, which is a little bit concerning to me. But his chase rate, 92nd percentile. He doesn't chase. He doesn't whiff very much. He was in the 16th percentile in terms of strikeouts, 26.4% strikeout rate. So for a guy who doesn't chase very often, it sounds like he misses in the strike zone a little bit. But he's got a good walk rate, 82nd percentile in walk rate. And his fielding, middle of the pack fielder, 0 outs above average, which puts him like a 54th percentile. Arm strength is decent. Sprint speed is about middle of the pack. So yeah, I guess in terms of the overall player, if you're looking for somebody for this team in particular, Taylor Ward probably makes the most sense because he gives you about the same offensive production as Jo Adell does with better defense in one of the corner outfields, and you can probably feel better about playing him every day, I would think, as opposed to just a strict platoon bat. And neither of these guys platooned this year. They were both everyday players for the Angels. So neither, again, like you said, Justin, neither guy's the answer. You're not going to find Pete Alonso in the outfield, either in trade or in the outfield, or as a free agent this offseason.
Do you think that Ward's numbers, like just being what they are, and like you're characterizing it, they're similar, but Ward can play better defense. Like obviously that feels like we're leaning a little more towards Ward, but I guess what I'm saying is, do you think whatever deal they do to address this outfield need, do you think it's going to be more about next year or next year and subsequent years? Because Ward is a deal you make for next year. Yeah. And you're not thinking really about anything else. Whereas like, I think the appeal of Adell for people might be like, okay, you bring him in and he's under team control, I think, for an additional year. It is just the one more, but you get 2 years. And you're kind of thinking, all right, this guy's got a ceiling to reach that maybe we can coax out of him. I think you're kind of creating more questions when you bring him in. It is something of a more thrilling version of what they were doing last year, bringing guys in to bounce back, whereas in Adell's case, it's like we're bringing a guy in to see if he can keep playing and perhaps even improve. Whereas with Ward, we're saying we're bringing in this guy because we know what he can do. It's fine if he's just here this year. We think he can help us in the way we've been missing to win a World Series. So do you think this deal is going to be more about just next year or planning for the future as well?
I think for this particular deal with these two guys, because like you said, Jo Adell's only under team control for one additional season. This is more of a short-term fix, right? I mean, this is not something where you're looking like, I think we've solved our outfield issue. Even if you get Jo Adell, who is younger, but you could sign him to a long-term deal if he plays well here in 2026, if you get him. But it feels to me like this is just kind of a short-term solution. And I mean, listen, if Taylor Ward plays really well or Jo Adell plays really well, you could sign them for longer. You can keep them aboard, like the Phillies might do with Harrison Bader this offseason. It could be a similar type of situation, but I think ideally probably not. It's probably just, and that's why Taylor Ward probably makes more sense. Jo Adell, the Phillies can't afford to have a bust. Like if they make this trade, they can't afford to have a guy do a Jordan Romano on him or a Max Kepler on him, where they're just unplayable for large portions of the season. So I think Taylor Ward is a better stopgap from that happening, a better firewall from that happening than Jo Adell is.
And if like that was out there, which I'm not saying it needs to be, but if like that idea was out there that the Phillies are looking for a short-term guy who can do this, then suddenly Ward gets a lot more appealing because then he's part of the plan. You know what I mean? And again, like I said, no matter what happens, there's going to be a bunch of people, if they were to sign or go for either of these, trade for either of these two guys, there would be people who would be like, this was stupid. They should not have done this. But just like with Harrison Bader, we were all very underwhelmed by that. All either of these guys would have to do is show up, hit like an extra base hit with runners on base in the first week of the season, and then you're good, man. Like,
well, look at
that's
Harrison
that buys
Bader. He became a
exactly my point,
superstar in like 3 weeks.
Exactly. So suddenly he's got a bunch of people that he's everybody's favorite player, and that's all. People forget this off-season conversation stuff very quickly as soon as the baseball starts getting played.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to get to before we get to our conversation with Matt Winkelman, and that's Andrew Painter. I'm kind of wanting to dive into some of these prospects a little bit, and Matt knows these prospects as well as anybody. I like us talking to people outside the organization with regard to the prospects, because I like hearing the Phillies side of it too. I've had Preston Mattingly on the podcast, and it's good to hear what the Phillies think of these guys, and they're going to paint a rosy picture publicly anyway, but they're invested in promoting these guys and them doing well. And so you kind of understand that as you're talking to any team about their own prospects. When you get outside ideas, and that's one of the things, like, to hear from, like, if you listen to Josh Norris from Baseball America or somebody else, I mean, Andrew Painter is still regarded as one of the best pitching prospects in baseball, which, kind of made his season last year a little bit disorienting. And I guess as we kind of approach this offseason, it doesn't sound as if the Phillies are more open to trading him now than they were last offseason or at the trade deadline. But I'm curious. I don't see anybody out there right now that I would trade Andrew Painter there for, I don't think, at this moment. But, like, hypothetically speaking, Justin, are you more open to trading him now than you were at the start of last season or even at midseason? Like, did his AAA numbers, how much did they worry you or scare you off from thinking, like, this is our next Garrett Cole, this is our guy?
Well, you get to you're bowling a perfect frame in the 8th. You just kind of naturally want to see the rest of it play out. And it would have been great to see Andrew Painter be this, like, absolutely gobsmacking prospect that left people utterly mystified with his skill and prowess from the moment he was pitching as a professional to the moment he debuted in the major leagues. So, like, this hiccup was a bummer to see, but not in a big way, because you knew exactly why it was happening. Command is the last thing pitchers get back after Tommy John surgery. Andrew Painter is very young, and his success relies on his fastball command, like many pitchers, so he was struggling to just nail that down for a lot of the time that he was back this year. He was also facing the highest level of hitters he's ever faced in his career at AAA. He had not pitched at that level before, and that level includes more guys who have seen and hit major league pitching. So their ability to hit him when he was also in a rawer state, more exposed and making more mistakes, is going to lead to the kind of performances you're going to see. My slight openness to trading him is very limited. It's just in the idea of, like, if you can get, like, Tarek Skubal in a package that includes Andrew Painter, I'm doing that. But I'm not looking to get rid of Andrew Painter, and that might be the only guy I would be truly thinking to send him in a trade for. So it's based on how high of a return you think you could really get. If somebody's willing to, like, oh yeah, we'll go nuts for Andrew Painter, then, like, yeah, I'm a little more open to it now than I was last year. But Charlotte Barnes of the Athletic wrote more about how Andrew Painter talked about his year this year, and, like, the impact of like the pressure of being this top prospect, and the Phillies being like, yeah, we expect him to be a part of this, blah blah blah, and he would just talk about how his mind was just racing. And I think that's not going to be very surprising for people to hear. Young guy coming back from an injury, seems to have some pressure being put on him. The Phillies worked with him on his mound presence, on his breathing, when to step off or ask for a new ball to catch his breath. They were teaching him kind of the ins and outs of that, how to set the rhythm for the game, how to set his rhythm for the game. He was working on his pitch selection and his offerings. He had a good-looking changeup. That has historically been his weakest pitch, but by the end of the season, he was getting hitters out with that changeup at the end of the season in September. And the most, I think, crucial part of this was Barnes wrote about how he was talking to fellow TG patient Jesus Luzardo a lot, and they really bonded, and they would talk about how to execute pitches, particular grips to use, strategies for individual hitters. So Andrew Painter was going through a lot that, like, nobody out here was seeing. It was just a lot of, like, oh, this is not as good, and we're getting reports that, like, this pitch wasn't working for him, but he's going through it in good and bad ways. He is learning how to be a major league pitcher by getting close with a major league pitcher who's been through what he's been through. And I think there's plenty of reasons why you were seeing like the first real prolonged struggling of his career. I think that's honestly, I think that's very obvious why at this particular time, that's why that stuff was happening. So to answer your question, no, I'm not going to say that I'm particularly concerned that like Andrew Painter has fallen off because of what happened last year. I think he is going to be an important part of the Phillies pitching staff moving forward. And I think you're going to see him in the big leagues sooner rather than later. And trading him would be, I mean, I'd forget about it. The level of guy that I would assume would come back in an Andrew Painter trade would be so exciting. I wouldn't even probably think about Andrew Painter again.
So the names Byron Buxton and Ketel Marte wouldn't do it for you, is what I'm hearing.
You want me to trade Andrew Painter for 80 games of Byron Buxton limping around second base? I mean, the guy's amazing, but like, come on, we know he's 32 and it's just, the time to trade for Byron Buxton was 10 years ago.
or if they're willing to give you Justin Crawford plus, right? I mean, like that's if I'm willing to do that. Like I would trade Justin Crawford as a lead for Byron Buxton and give him a bunch of other players, but yeah, I don't think that's the kind of deal we're talking about. And the real reason we're talking about Byron Buxton is because at the GM meetings last week, it became was reported that he'd be open to waive his no trade clause if the Twins continue to sell off pieces this winter, which it's not clear exactly if they're going to do that or not. So he might not even be available. But yeah, he only played 126 games last year, and that was still the second most of his career, and only the third time in 11 seasons he's played more than 100 games, and he's going to be 32 next year. Good contract, 3 years at $15 million a season, and he's an MVP caliber player when he's on the field. But man, 35 homers last year, 83 RBIs. He's a right-handed center fielder plus defender. I mean, he's exactly what you need if you're the Phillies. But yeah, there's a lot of red flags there. And then Ketel Marte, there are rumors, a lot of heat to Ketel Marte rumors that the Diamondbacks are going to be looking to move him. And he's an offensive machine, 145 OPS plus last year, 28 homers, 72 RBIs. He was a Silver Slugger Award winner. So was Buxton. He only played in 126 games. And then there were some clubhouse issues. He apparently wanted to take vacations during the season last year and
Can you do that?
I didn't think you could do that. And apparently you can't.
I know umpires can do that.
His teammates were not happy about that last year. And he's signed for 6 more years and $91 million through his age 37 season. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade Andrew Painter for either one of them. I also wouldn't include Aiden Miller in any contract for them, in any trade for them. But man, in terms of players who would fit exactly what the Phillies need in that lineup, those are two guys that absolutely do. But again, this is just one of those things where there's no match. There's just no match because the Phillies farm system doesn't have enough pieces in it.
And frankly, the need for starting pitching, I think, is present.
It's real.
For this
it's
team
real.
right now.
It is. They need Andrew Painter as a starter. They need him.
Yeah. They need him a lot more than they would need, another 32-year-old
That's very
player.
fair. Yeah. Yep. I agree. We don't think about that. We're so focused on the offense and fixing this offense, the offensive troubles that they always have. But, you're losing Ranger Suarez, and nobody knows what Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola are going to do. So, I mean, Andrew Painter's a question mark too, but yeah, you got to get as many guys in that rotation that have a chance to really help you as you can. So I agree with you. I think he's untouchable despite of what was it, 5.40 ERA in AAA last year. I think most folks don't believe that will repeat itself here in 2025. All right, we're going to go to our interview with Matt Winkelman here. Justin, you spoke to him earlier this week. Set this up for us.
Sure. The Arizona Fall League Championship was on November 15th, and shortly before that, I talked to Matt about the 8 Phillies prospects. I think there actually was 9 total because one of them switched out for another one because I think one of them left to get married. But all of the Phillies prospects that went out to the Arizona Fall League, and we kind of just talked down the list, starting with Dante Nori, their top draft pick in 2024. We talked about their performances out there, and then he kind of gave a general state of the farm system going into the 2026 offseason, which is always really beneficial to me because there's a lot going on in any farm system, even one that's kind of like been mid at best for the last decade or so, like the Phillies. And he's good at giving you shorthand as to what to expect from this minor league system in the offseason ahead. So yeah, just a nice review of what's been going on in Arizona with the guys the Phillies sent out there.
All right, here we go.
good at. And I think Nori's is definitely a center fielder. But you're looking at a guy he hit 308 in the fall league. He hit well over 300 over the second half. But he's gonna hit eighth or ninth in a major league lineup, play a good center fielder, and that's what you'd want to be someone's downside, not this is what would happen if it goes well. And maybe there's more there. It was his first year, but he'd have to really retool his swing and approach to drive the ball more. And it's also not sure there's more power present. So he sort of is what he is. If you like batting average, it looks good. He has a good approach. He's probably going to be near major league ready by the end of next year. And he kind of did Dante Nori things in the Arizona Fall League.
So since he profiles kind of similarly to Justin Crawford, who has been talked about a lot lately, given the role he could play in the 2026 Phillies and how that could impact what the Phillies do or don't do with their roster and the offseason and everything. I mean, is Nori the kind of center fielder that, he's going to profile as, this is like a true center fielder they've got coming up? Or is it going to be like next year, we're once again going to see the time-honored tradition of a center field prospect get labeled as like, but his future's probably in the corners or something, because there's like 10 guys on earth who can actually play center field, apparently.
No, he's legitimately a center fielder, but you're also going, is there going to be enough bat here? It's different than the Johan Rojas conversation where you're like, he's a center fielder, but do I want to start him in my lineup 162 times? And the answer continues to be probably not.
I coined the phrase Nohan Morjas the other day. How do you feel about that? Fair enough. Yeah, I hear you. So okay, on Nori, can we at least say high floor, low ceiling? Would that at least be?
I think that's probably where he was on draft day, and it's sort of where he is now. Right. Even though that kind of floor, we learn more and more that high floor isn't always a real thing, because it's just one thing goes wrong and suddenly there is no floor.
Yeah, I mean, with prospects, you never know. Floor drops out at any time. Speaking of which, a couple of these guys the Phillies sent were absolutely muddled by injury in some cases across their entire careers. Shortstop Brian Rincon is out there. He's also 21. He's a defensive whiz at shortstop. He's struggled to develop into a capable hitter, and he's also struggled to just stay on the field due to injury. This was his second trip to the AFL. Is it common for a guy to be a repeat performer in the Arizona Fall League, or does that mean something in particular in regards to his development?
I mean, missing most of, or at least half of the last 2 years probably isn't good. Also, I mean, we joked about there not being any good prospects here. When they announced the list, it was supposed to include Aiden Miller and Carson DiMartini, and they determined Aiden had shown them enough and it was a little banged up, so they ended the season, and DiMartini had to have, I believe, more surgery on an injury that hadn't healed. So on some level, some of these players are here because they're replacements, in the same way that we end up down, we get to the All-Star game and, we are 5 injury replacements deep and someone has to go. In this case, Rincon had, I believe, a hamate injury this year, so that definitely affects hitting. But he was a guy who popped onto the scene after his draft year, so back in 2023. And he was a good shortstop, showed a good approach, a little bit of questioning about power. He's not a big guy. And it looked like, he hits the ball well enough to get the most out of what he has. And then he reached Jersey Shore, and there's just no power there. And he's passive at the plate. And then, unlike, say, Starlin Cabo, who they traded for Jesus Luzardo, Rincon is a good shortstop, but he's not he's so good that you just don't care if he hits. I think at this point, you're saying optimistically, he comes up as an up and down defensive replacement type, but I think he's strongly trending towards not really a prospect anymore, unless he comes back next year and he's totally healthy and totally a different guy. But it's sort of disappointing because he was exciting to start, but we're now 2 years of injury and no real growth on somebody that didn't have a huge ceiling.
Yeah, he's got to show us something that we were expecting to see, years ago. Now, having gone through several injury-riddled seasons, it's a messy place to be in for a prospect and creates the kind of outlook that you described, unfortunately. And I feel like that's probably the case for a bunch of these guys that are out in Arizona right now for the Phillies. Outfielder Dylan Campbell went from Jersey Shore to Reading in 2025. He's got decent pop with the bat, speed on the bases. Despite his status as an outfielder, Campbell was deployed to play home. Wow, that's a new one. Was deployed to play some second and third base in the Arizona Fall League this year. Is Campbell a strong candidate for some kind of position switch? What would necessitate that change? Is he like an interesting guy in that way? Or is he somebody the Phillies are trying to say like, all right, look, maybe this will work if we have him playing in the infield now?
So he played second and a little third and outfield in college. I think there's some debate on how good a center fielder he is, but he can play it. But really a lot of this is Dylan Campbell's not an everyday player. However, as Phillies fans, he fits uniquely with this sort of team they've developed. He doesn't really hit right-handed pitchers that well, but he hits lefties. He only faced 10 lefties in the Arizona Fall League, but went 5 for 10 with 2 home runs. He hit them much better all season. But yes, he can play at least during the season, second base a couple of times, all 3 outfield positions. Legitimately can play center field. And then so they worked in some third and some first. And so what you have is somebody with less pop than like the Weston Wilson, Otto Kemp types, and probably a little less hit and a little less optimism versus right-handed pitchers. He's not a disaster, but he's not great. But someone who can actually play the positions listed next to them on their baseball card. Like Otto Kemp has second base listed next to him. You don't really want to play Otto Kemp at second base. Campbell is a little bit differently flexible than like Edmundo Sosa, who hasn't really played the outfield but can play all over the infield. Campbell's not going to play short, but it maybe third. First is like a real sort of stretch. It's nice to have someone who can stand there if you need it. But there's a real role for a guy who can play the outfield and second base and hit lefties. Like that's a real major league player. We see like the Dodgers have that type of guy. It's a type of like there's no right-handed hitting. I'm sure as you guys have gone through like off-season preview, you're like, oh, who are the right-handed outfielders? And it's like, do I really trust Rob Refsnyder? He's like been around forever and never been really like great. So like no one wants to hit right-handed. And like I'm not saying like Campbell's gonna be up like soon or he's gonna be this guy, but like if you're drawing the outline of what can he be as a major leaguer, you're like, oh, there's a real role for this guy if he can continue to hit lefties and play multiple positions defensively.
Sounds like the Phillies are flush with potential major league role players, which is sure to get a lot of people excited about the minor leagues, especially since the next guy we're going to talk about was just released by the Phillies. And as we get into the pitchers that were sent to the Arizona Fall League, Iverson Castellanos missed a ton of time due to shoulder problems in 2025. He was hit with a lot. He was hit a lot with Jersey Shore in the South Atlantic League this season. He appeared once for Reading, got lit up so hard in 1 1/3 innings of work that all that was left was a smoking crater. But the Phillies wanted to see that wicked curveball in action, so the 24-year-old righty went out to Arizona. He had a 3.86 ERA through 4 appearances. That might be different since the last time I checked. But he was averaging between 3 and 4 innings per appearance. It's not that crazy for a league for the AFL. Castellanos struck out 18, walked 7, allowed 10 hits, and 1 home run. At the end of the regular season, you actually wrote, if he can find some of the reliever vibes from his time with the Twins, he would fit enough of the Phillies' needs that they will need to really consider just giving him the 40-man spot this time. Seems like that's probably not going to happen now that recent developments have occurred.
Yeah, so they let him go to minor league free agency last week, and didn't add him to the 40. Last winter, he was Rule 5 eligible. They didn't protect him. He was sort of like 93 to 96 as a starting pitcher, bunch of like sort of average stuff. Think maybe he'll play up as a reliever. And I forgot to open up the tabs. Let me find it. He was like 95 to 98, touched 99 in spring training with the Twins. Not great control. He didn't make the Twins roster, got offered back to the Phillies, then had a shoulder problem, and was more 91 to 94, and that was sort of where he was in the fall league, so they put him back in the rotation. Yeah, he had that one appearance for Jersey Shore, and yeah, was in and out of like sort of middle relief with Redding, and it just at 91 to 94 he was less than he was with the Phillies last year in his starting pitching role, and it's just that wasn't worth the 40-man spot. Maybe he comes back on a minor league deal. I'm assuming someone will sign him, say, well, maybe if this guy gets healthy again, he'll be mid to upper 90s out of a bullpen, and we can see if we have something there. But I don't think for the Phillies he showed enough in the fall to guarantee him that. But it's sort of disappointing because he looked like he might be breaking out in spring, and it just shoulder injuries suck.
Yep. That's kind of long and short of it, is that shoulder injury winds up playing a bigger role as time moves forward. Now, you can tell me if I'm wrong for doing this. There's a bunch of other pitchers they sent out there. I did start grouping them all together, but there are largely a lot of hard throwers. A lot of guys who you see get noted that they can hit 97, 98. There's Jack Dallas, Phillies pitching prospect, who I can't believe isn't the protagonist in a series of increasingly bad detective novels. He's got a dandy of a heater and a slider that misses bats. He was okay with Redding, but missed a month of the season this year. In the AFL, Dallas pitched 9 innings, allowed 1 earned run and only 5 hits, striking out 15 of 37 batters that he faced, and he walked 7 of them. How close is this 26-year-old Dallas to being the Phillies' next swingman out of the bullpen?
Probably not that close, but there's guys that, I mean, his brother is like a legitimate, like, sort of prospect in the Blue Jays organization. Dallas is, what is he, 26? He'll be 27 in a month. It's sort of a kitchen sink of stuff. He can really spin the ball. He's got both a slider and a sweeper. There's a changeup. There's a four-seamer and a sinker. It's not great stuff. There's some interesting stuff there. Like, he's the type of guy that hangs around a system and occasionally ends up as like an up and down reliever. He's a good guy to have in like AA. Maybe even he might bump to AAA next year, but he's sort of, I would say, a tier below the other 3 guys, I think, that are on your list. Plus, there's a 4th who snuck in at the last second to the AFL.
They love doing that. Love these extra prospects just sneaking in the back door, and everyone's like, I mean, it's the AFL. You know, you're not.
We could jump to him. Is Damiani Polito was actually supposed to go to Australia, and he'll go there in like a week to join Adelaide, where the Phillies have a group. But so Tommy McCollum, who's on the list of guys to get to, I believe got married, and so they needed a spot, or they needed someone to fill a spot. And Polito was going to head off to Australia, so stops in Arizona. But he definitely was a lower minors guy who pitched for. He was a Threshers closer for most of the second half. Sort of inconsistent, but higher velocity fastball at times. Interesting slider. He's learning the splitter. There's a couple of guys who are learning like a sort of really low spin splitter. And by that I mean it shows up a couple of times when you look at the StatCast tracking. You're like, oh, that's at like 500 RPM. That's definitely a splitter, not a real changeup or a cutter or something.
Yeah, but next year you're going to hear about all these pitchers throwing what's called like a spinster or something. Like that'll be the trendy new pitch of the year. We also had Jaden Estanista out there and Daniel Harper, and that closes out my list. I actually didn't know about Tommy McCollum getting married. That's a fun little twist on the AFL. But Estanista, he can throw 98. He's got command problems. I mean, you know, you can read a million young pitcher profiles, and that exact profile will probably pop up a bunch of times. Speaking of which, Daniel Harper can hit 97, but he was injured. He got knocked around a lot in 2025. And we mentioned McCollum. He can throw 97. He's had 12 saves in Reading this year. Of that bunch, McCollum probably put up the best numbers in the fall in the AFL, even though he allowed 6 runs in 7 innings. 4 were not earned. He has that little asterisk next to it. Is anybody, you're kind of getting to this point, I think, but is anybody from that trio or with that extra guy who filled in for McCollum of particular note to you, or does this kind of round out your overall grade of this group of prospects that, like, yeah, bunch of guys the Phillies wanted to see more of and didn't really, do a whole lot to get attention out there in the desert?
Yeah. So we should note that the fall league is strongly hitter friendly. Take all pitching stats with a slight grain of salt. Is also the hitting side too. Harper was up to 99 in the spring, and there was this whole thing of like, oh, he'll go to like Lehigh Valley and he'll be up soon, and then sort of injuries and stuff. And yeah, he's been more 94 to 96 late. And everything's just not quite as sharp. McCollum has a good splitter. He's worked a cutter. And we should say with McCollum with the splitter, it goes all the way back to his college days. It's not part of the new trends. And then, yeah, Estinista is sort of an arm strength guy, quick arm. I think there was some thought that there would be some more velocity. He hasn't consistently shown that. All of them, and I would say it's probably, in this case, it's probably McCollum, Harper, Estinista are like sort of fringy guys who will, I think probably Harper and McCollum will get spring training invites. But types of guys that like come middle of the season, you're like, oh, they called up this guy from AAA because they needed a reliever, and he was the hot arm for the week. But so there's like a chance that all these guys are like 6th to 8th best reliever at a bullpen at some point. Like, I'm not going to say any of them will be, but you put enough of these guys in a bucket, and one of them has a stint as a quality major leaguer for a season or two. That's just sort of what happens with the minor league relievers. So, I mean, you may hear their names again. You may never hear of them again, but I do expect to see some of them in spring.
Yeah, feels like a safe bet. And as the AFL Championship is on Saturday, November 15th, and the league closes down for the year, World Series is also long behind us. So before we head into, what is the full-on crazy season for baseball and roster moves and trades and whatever people are looking forward to as far as changes with the Phillies, I was wondering if you could do us and me the favor of saying, right now, going into 2026, what is like the shorthand of the Phillies farm system right now? Like, if you had to describe it very briefly, what is the general state of things?
It's really shallow. So I think Jared Seidler of Baseball Prospectus made this clear in his ranking, which I think came out on Monday of this week. I don't know when this will go up. There's 2 very good prospects, 3 sort of fine prospects, and that's so it's Miller, Painter, and then I think most rankings will have the grouping of Gage Wood, Justin Crawford, and Arun Escobar in some order. It depends on your personal preferences. I don't think there's a big gap between them. All 5 of them are good prospects. And then after that, there's like sort of a range of maybe 10 to 15 guys, depending on your preferences, that are like fine prospects, maybe not top 10, or you're like, oh, this guy is 15. I don't think I want him as my 15th best prospect, but like they're fine, interesting prospects. And then it really drops off. And some of this has been drafting, development, trades. I mean, if you're going to trade away Mick Abel, Eduardo Taid, Hendry Mendez would have been a borderline top 10, easily top 20 prospect in the system. They traded Starlin Cabo last year. Like, they consistently are sort of gutting the back of they're not gutting the farm system, but they're continually like taking out like real prospects, and that does catch up when you talk about overall depth. So as we go into like looking at next year, there's three guys who might contribute to the 2026 Phillies. That's not a thing we've had for a while, where we have like legitimate like rookie types outside of waiting for Andrew Painter. But it's not a ton after that. There is a couple of, we talk about that next group, and we'll get more clarity next week with Rule 5 stuff. But Alex McFarland, Gabriel Rincones, I'm probably forgetting somebody else, are like, could contribute to the major leagues next year. So there's some guys. It's not like there's nothing, but it's not like, oh, there's just waves coming. There aren't. I think their most recent draft, there's a lot of interesting pitchers. I think there was some overestimation on how quickly they'll arrive, because everyone's like, oh, they put them in the bullpen, they'll get there fast. And the Phillies have like no starting pitching prospects prior to the draft outside of like the top guys. So I think a lot of them is going to refill some of that starting pitching pipeline. But yeah, the overall like quick thing is there's some good stuff, and then there's not a lot of depth. It drops off quickly. And they're going to have to do something about that. But also, it's really going to impact them in terms of trades. Like, you can't really say, I'm going to bring up young guys and save some money so that I can fit payroll under, like, not Dodgers level payroll. Like, we're not cutting money here, but, like, we're not running a $400 million payroll next year. But, like, you can't trade those guys and still do that. So you sort of run into this thing where, like, oh, there's a couple of guys they have for trades, so they're not going to be able to go young players plus, oh, we're going to swing a big deal. They already did that for Yohan Duran. Like, that's the thing. Like, and he's around for 2 more years, which is great.
Well, everybody enjoy the promotions of Andrew Painter, Justin Crawford, those like 5 guys you mentioned, because then after that, right as you're getting used to seeing a steady pace of good prospects going into the majors from the Phillies minor league system, that's going to stop immediately. So everyone just brace yourself. That's why we do this. Just set expectations. Matt Winkelman, you can read his work on PhilliesMinorThoughts.com. Matt, thanks for joining us on Hittin Season.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
All right, good stuff there from Matt Winkelman on the Arizona Fall League and the Phillies farm system. Really do hope the farm system can get itself together this year. And again, I would love to talk to somebody who, can really give the ins and outs. Like, what are the issues? Is it drafting? Is it player development? Is it, picking the players? Is the fact they've picked so late in each round by being so, picking, by having such good regular seasons, they're picking late. They're not picking near the top of the drafts. I don't know. It's all stuff to get into as the offseason rolls along. Let's finish up the podcast with just a couple of questions from the mailbag. You can always send an email question into us at hittinseason@billypenn.com. That's our email address for the show, hittinseason@billypenn.com, or you can hit me up on X or Blue Sky, or Justin on Blue Sky as well. We'll go to the Twitter mailbag at RJP, I had to look real close, at RJP217, asked, Justin Crawford had a 929 OPS versus left-handers last year in 91 plate appearances. Should we feel excited about his ability to be a non-platoon player in the future for the Phillies? This would make a Marsh right-handed platoon much more viable if they can land the right guy for the third outfield spot. I don't even know, again, like Adell and Ward, that we were talking about those guys, but I don't think they would be platoon guys. I don't think you'd want them playing in 1/3 of the games and Marsh playing in the other 2/3. So it's interesting, Justin, if they have Justin Crawford lined up for one of these spots. He has in his career had reverse splits. It doesn't sound like you would need him to be a platoon guy, although, the Phillies, they love them some platoons.
Yeah, and if the platoon works, then it works. I think people get a little nervous when there's so many, moving parts to a roster, and they want to see positions get stabilized and everything. But yeah, I mean, if you have the ability to put a productive platoon out there, I mean, I guess that's there's no harm in it. But last week I kept saying it's up to Crawford to prove he belongs in the big leagues now. The other half of that is that he is completely capable of proving that. He is. He's like a very, very good top prospect in baseball. He's got flaws in his game that we're all aware of, but this is going to be his chance to prove that, I'm just a minor league stud, and I'm not a guy who needs to split time with somebody. I'm somebody who can hold down left field for you on a regular basis. But that's what it is. The diagnosis right now is that it's a corner outfield spot again. So he's got to be a non-platoon player in one of those spots, and you still got more to figure out there.
Yeah, definitely. Blue Sky at #1 Hertz fan asks, What do you think is the most likely outcome with Nick Castellanos, trade or release? And I think it is interesting that Nick Castellanos could be a guy who's non-tendered this week, so you could see some movement on the Castellanos front sooner rather than later. I just think, Justin, as I think back to the fact that Max Kepler, after the season he had in Minnesota in 2024, got a 1-year, $10 million deal. I gotta believe that if the Phillies are willing to eat like 15 of the $20 million and a team's on the hook for 1 year and $5 million of Nick Castellanos, that might be worth a number 15 prospect or something like that. So I kind of leaning towards trade right now.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, in the sense that Dave Dombrowski can squeeze a low-level prospect out of somebody for Nick Castellanos, right? Like, that was my instinct, was to land on that spot. But really, when you look at lists of specific teams' needs in Major League Baseball this winter, do you see any that are after what Castellanos gives you? Weak offense, unproductive at bats, league worst defense, complaining about the manager in post-game interviews? Me neither. So if somebody bites on Castellanos, he is likely that team's plan C, or it's like the White Sox or something.
Or the Marlins.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, I don't think it's impossible that Dombrowski squeezes a low-level prospect out of somebody, but he wasn't doing a lot right. He wasn't doing a lot appealing by the end of it. And if I was the team that was getting Nick Castellanos, I'd be like, okay, so like, what else are we doing? Anything? Say something.
Well, I'll say this about Castellanos. He was very productive in the last month and a half of the season as a strict platoon player with Max Kepler in right field. And he did
Which he hated.
Like 2 of the only big hits in the playoffs. And he was good in the playoffs in 2024. So, I think if you're the Phillies, that's how you're trying to sell him. That's how you're selling. Like, listen, if we release him and you try to sign him, he's going to cost you more than $5 million. Max Kepler got 10. Like, he's just going to cost more than $5 million.
Yeah.
He had a better season in 2025 than Max Kepler had in 2024, and he's a right-handed outfielder, which there aren't many of those in Major League Baseball. So if you're the Phillies and you can eat all but like $5 to $7 million of that, I think there's a chance you could find a sucker out there and take their money. All right, and last one. This came from email. Eli Marone emailed us a couple of questions. I'm going to choose the second of his 2 questions here. Harry Kalas is obviously a Philly legend and icon. Has Scott Franzke reached Harry Kalas level yet? Justin, this is an interesting question.
It feels like a scary question. I don't know why.
It is kind of a scary question. And I just say, I think the world of Scott Franzke. I've never spoken to him, on the podcast personally, whatever. He doesn't know me from Adam, I'm sure. I love what he brings to the table. I love his calls on the radio. I'm a radio guy myself. The way he's able to paint a picture is just tremendous. So I love Scott Franzke. I grew up with Harry Kalas. There's something about that era of broadcasters. I don't know that we're going to see those kinds of guys revered again. Because there was, back in those days, there were 2 mediums, one for a long time, radio, and then radio and television. Those are the only 2 ways you heard people. And now there's all kinds of different national broadcasts and all these guys. So I don't think anyone can get to Harry Kalas level. No shame on Scott Franzke.
No, that's my answer too. Scott Franzke is also a Philadelphia legend and also an icon. I think that's completely true, but Harry Kalas just doesn't exist anymore. Like, that model of guy. And part of being that model of guy was what made him what he was. Like, not just this fantastic broadcaster with an incredible voice, but who was like excellent at what he did and could have chemistry with like a lampshade, but also just, bonding with the players, which was like still unheard of at that point in time, to be fraternizing with the players and drinking on the plane with the players and getting into scraps and trouble with the players. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. And it's part of why he is such a legend and so embedded in the culture of the Phillies. Scott Franzke, I think, you might be able to describe him in exactly the same way, but it's just a different thing. It's a different time. It's a different era, and media has just changed so entirely much. But Scott Franzke is a beloved member of the Phillies forever, for all time, easily.
Yeah, for sure. I think the good questions from the mailbag there for sure. Again, if we'll be trying to squeeze in a few mailbag questions at the end of every podcast here in the off season. So you can send them in. Again, it's hittinseason@billypenn.com, or you can always tweet them at me, or you can send them to Justin or me or I or us at Blue Sky. I don't know what the right grammatical way of saying that sentence was. All right, let's finish up here with some final thoughts. Justin, anything final from you, bud?
Yeah, just anxious now for the winter meetings. I'm very curious to see. I feel like we've done a lot of setting up. Now I'm ready to see some things kind of take place. Seeing a little bit of, even if it's not the Phillies, just kind of see some markets kind of taking shape here is going to be interesting, because I do maintain that this is going to be a more trade happy offseason in general across baseball, I think. And it's also going to be a little more active and interesting for the Phillies. And that might, that's going to be relative to the baseball offseason, which means there might be a thing. And then weeks later, a second one. But that's going to still be a little more active than last year, when there was not a whole lot to talk about. So very curious to see how any of these many different potential outcomes that we've been discussing and will continue to discuss are going to take shape. I look forward to talking about Taylor Ward with you again next year, John, when he's a free agent.
Same here. It's right here in the fields for sure. And like I said, this week could be some things going down this week. If the Phillies do anything of note, there will be a podcast of some kind coming at you to talk about it. But in the meantime, until the Phillies do something, we'll wrap it up here for this edition of Hittin' Season. I want to remind you, everybody, that the Roundtable podcasts all off season can be found over at our WHYY YouTube page, our fantastic content partners with WHYY. Just subscribe to their YouTube page, and you can also just make sure that you're following all of the Hittin' Season podcasts that show up there. And Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we're on the old school podcast ways. For those of you listening audio only, we can still be found on all those platforms. Make sure to tell your friends and family about us. We are going to be with you all off season long. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time right here on Hittin' Season.